Good morning, and welcome to the Global Current. I'm Alex Krause.
And I'm Karina Taylor.
This week in news, oil prices affect Russian economy.
Rebel attacks in Yemen.
China steals Australian fighter jet plan.
In analysis, potential foreign policy implications of President Obama's State of the Union address.
The future of the Global Action 2015 as the UN's Millennium Development Goals expire.
And an interview with Seton Hall Jr. Cynthia Sularz on her experiences as the United States representative to the Girls 20 Summit in Australia.
Thanks for tuning in and enjoy the show.
And now Blythe Brady reports on oil prices and their effects on Russia's economy.
The year 2014 appeared to many to be Russia's for the taking. Russian President Vladimir Putin gained the limelight by annexing Crimea and opposing the European Union time and time again. However, by the end of 2014, the Great Bear lost some of the dominance it had gained over the course of several months. External factors of international sanctions and low oil prices worldwide have combined to adversely affect the Russian economy. President Obama noted in his State of the Union address on Tuesday that America and its allies have left Russia, quote, isolated with its economy in tatters, unquote. The international sanctions were levied against Russia following its involvement in Ukraine's political upheaval and annexation of the Crimea Peninsula. According to the International Law Office, these include sanctions against financial institutions that facilitate activities for Russian defense and energy sectors, as well as against large financial transactions on behalf of any Russian national. These sanctions and others like it imposed by the United States, the European Union, and other like-minded governments have serious effects on the Russian economy. The Moscow Times reports that the Russian ruble-US dollar exchange rate is at a low of 54 per US dollar, down from 30 to 35 per US dollar during the first half of 2014. Hopes to put a quick end to the economic crisis are receding in light of the current trend in global oil prices. Russia's chief export is oil and natural gas. The nation's prime market is Europe. Prior to sanctions against Russia over Ukraine, there were fears that Russia would retaliate by hiking up prices or even cutting off the flow of natural gas to its European market. According to the Washington Post, prices of oil have fallen dramatically, leaving Russia with devalued currency and exports. Combined with the sanctions levied against it, Russia is facing an uphill battle. However, the International Business Times reports that there could be relief in the future, as France's President Hollande makes a push to lift sanctions against Russia if conditions in the Ukraine soon improve.
I think the sanctions must stop now. They must be lifted if there's progress. If there isn't progress, the sanctions will remain.
Whether Russia will be able to emerge from its current economic downturn remains to be seen. At this time, the situation appears to be beyond Russia's control. Reporting for the Global Current, this is Blythe Brady.
Emily Livaday reports on recent rebel attacks in Yemen.
Yemen's democracy is in danger of collapse as Houthi rebels encroach on the capital city of Sana'a. Despite a ceasefire reached on Monday, Houthi rebels have gained the advantage in the conflict. According to NPR, Monday saw Houthi forces seizing control of both Yemen's official TV station and official news station. The Houthi have succeeded in taking control of the president's palace, eventually resulting in both the president and prime minister stepping down. Abdul Malik al-Houthi, the rebel leader, delivered a television speech on Tuesday criticizing Hadi's government. According to the BBC, al-Houthi claims Yemen has sunk deep into corruption and tyranny, and the country was headed toward complete collapse. Reuters reports that al-Houthi's rebellion is not an actual coup, and the President Hadi is apparently maintaining his position as president of Yemen while the rebels are demanding a significant revision of the constitution. Hadi's representatives deny that the president was under house arrest and maintain that he is meeting with the rebel group to reestablish order. However, the pressure placed on the president by the rebels caused both President Hadi and Prime Minister Khaled Baha to step down on Thursday, January 22nd. According to the BBC, Hadi expressed that he feels the country is in a deadlock and cannot arrive at a solution. Prime Minister Baha referred to Yemen's government as a political maze. So who is this rebel group causing turmoil? The Houthi are a Shiite rebel group under the leadership of 33-year-old Abdul Malik al-Houthi. Followers of Shia Islam are a minority in Sunni-dominated Yemen. In September of last year, the Houthi rebels reached an agreement with President Hadi that Houthis be granted partial control of the capital. The recent fighting has triggered concern from the international community. Yemen is a new democracy that holds a pivotal role in the war on terror. President Obama views Hadi as a key partner in fighting al-Qaeda in the Middle East. The UN News Center reports that UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon is calling for both sides to stop fighting and for citizens of Yemen to follow the legitimate authority. So far, no threats of sanction has been made. This is Emily Lividay for the Global Current.
Vaughn Rogers reports on China's theft of Australian fighter jet plans.
Over the weekend, Chinese cyber attacks stole key schematics for the Lockheed Martin F-35 Lightning II, an American joint strike fighter, reports Australian national news outlet The Age. The same report cites German magazine Der Spiegel as confirming the cyber attack via documents from Edward Snowden, a former U.S. intelligence contractor. The plans included detailed schematics of radar systems and engine design, among others. The Chinese cyber spying program, codenamed Operation Byzantine Hades, began back in 2007 and expanded its reach in many areas of the government and industry, according to an article in the Washington Times. So far, the Chinese have issued statements simultaneously denying the accusations of espionage and questioning the credibility of Edward Snowden's information. Although the Chinese government and its private enterprises like Xiaomi deny stealing and copying others' work, there exist past examples of just that in China. Articles from the New York Times, Daily Mail, Forbes, and Business Insider highlight a pattern in technology innovations and brand names being copied by Chinese enterprises. It was Xiaomi's infamous copying of the iPhone which showcased the problem to the world. Copying is a common technique used in Chinese education from Confucius' time until now in order to memorize the complex pictographical language that is Chinese. The New York Times article, China Conundrum, describes a cheating culture, at least by Western standards, developed from not only a tradition, but also the need to get ahead. Based on these examples, it is plausible that Chinese organizations, both private and government subsidized, will use similar strategies to gain advantages in economic and political spheres. This is Vaughn Rogers reporting for the Global Current.
Samantha Stevenson examines the foreign policy implications of President Obama's State of the Union address.
This past Tuesday, President Obama addressed the people of the United States of America about the State of the Union. He covered a wide variety of topics, many of which involved America overseas. He first spoke of the growing threat of ISIS and Syria, stating that the U.S. is leading a broad coalition of nations, including Arab partners, to destroy the jihadist group instead of getting dragged into another ground war in the Middle East. He proclaimed that we're also supporting a moderate opposition in Syria that can help us in this effort, and assisting people everywhere who stand up to the bankrupt ideology of violent extremism. He then called upon Congress to pass an authorization for the use of military force against the terrorist organization. CBS News notes that this call to Congress received a tepid applause from the audience. However, in the Republican response later that night, Senator Joni Ernst said that she and fellow congressmen will talk of supporting the exceptional military to defend against terrorist attacks.
This is where I'll join committee colleagues, Republicans and Democrats, to discuss ways to support our exceptional military and its mission.
She then went on to express her condolences for the terrorist attacks in France against Charlie Hebdo, which Obama also spoke about, causing a few members of Congress to wave pencils to show their support, according to CBS News. President Obama also defended his decision to begin normalizing relations with Cuba, pointing out Alan Gross in the crowd, the man released from Cuba this past December after spending 5 years in prison for alleged spying. President Obama described the new relationship as ending something long past its expiration date.
When what you're doing doesn't work for 50 years, it's time to try something new. And our shift in Cuba policy has the potential to end a legacy of mistrust in our hemisphere. It removes a phony excuse for restrictions in Cuba, stands up for democratic values, and extends the hand of friendship to the Cuban people.
He called on the importance of diplomacy, quoting Pope Francis in that it is the process of small steps that add up. President Obama also pointed to the importance of diplomacy by acknowledging the success in halting Iran's progress in developing their nuclear program and in reducing their stockpile of nuclear material. He then called on Congress to make sure not to alienate America from its allies.
But new sanctions passed by this Congress at this moment in time will all but guarantee that diplomacy fails, alienating America from its allies, making it harder to maintain sanctions, and ensuring that Iran starts up its nuclear program again. It doesn't make sense. And that's why I will veto any new sanctions bill that threatens to undo this progress.
President Obama's 2015 State of the Union address, while it mostly recalled the ways in which the United States has made a comeback on the domestic and foreign front, also highlighted the importance of diplomacy at this time. The president acknowledged America's important standing on the global stage and the duty we have as a country to maintain and support relations and alliances with other nations. This is Samantha Stevenson reporting for the Global Current.
Bjorn Schwarzenbach discusses the Global Action 2015 campaign and the future for the expiring Millennium Development Goals.
15 years after world leaders adopted the Millennium Development Goals, which include global targets to address extreme poverty, promote education, and prevent disease, the target date of 2015 has finally arrived. With just a year left to reach the MDG goals, the launch of the Global Action 2015 campaign took place last Thursday at events and platforms online and offline across the globe. Action 2015 is a campaign network made up of NGOs and civil society organizations around the world, all converging efforts to keep the momentum of the MDGs alive through the post-2015 agenda. This agenda is set to be finalized this September at a UN Special Summit on Sustainable Development and a Climate Change Conference in December, thereby culminating a year of busy negotiations and consultations between governments, international organizations, and civil society. On January 15th, over 1,000 organizations dealing in various aspects of international development across 125 countries joined the digital rally, where even the hashtag Action2015 trended on Twitter that day. The main goal of Action 2015 is to eradicate extreme poverty, and with adequate political will this year, this eradication is achievable for the first time in history.
Hello, I'm Ban Ki-moon, Secretary General of the United Nations. 2015 is a very important year for all of us. January 15 is when the global movement Action 2015 launches, and we at the United Nations kick off 2015, Time for Global Action.
To celebrate the launch, 15-year-olds, the generation that was born the same year the original MDGs were created, met and spoke with world leaders around the world. In the UK, youth advocates met Prime Minister David Cameron to discuss the new campaign, while in the US, 15-year-olds met with USAID Director Raj Shah and with State Department officials to advocate for greater U.S. commitments in fighting extreme poverty moving forward. Here's what one advocate had to say about the new campaign.
Action 2015 to me means that I can help shape the future for the better and help influence the world leaders to make the right decisions at the upcoming events in September and December.
Seton Hall's own chapter of the One campaign and several other students were able to attend one of many launch events in New York City at the Global Poverty Project offices, along with organizations such as the United Nations Population Fund, the One campaign, the UN Foundation, and the Open Defecation Organization. The diversity and development organizations at this one event demonstrated the heightened energy that comes from combining resources and hands-on experience between numerous NGOs in a network campaign like Action 25. The new campaign, along with UN consultations with various stakeholders, have culminated into a new process of governance where political decisions center around an inclusive development agenda. In a globalized world where issues concerning development come from New York City and end up affecting the entire world, political decision makers cannot afford to ignore calls from youth, citizens, and civil society for an inclusive political voice in constructing future development agendas. As One Campaign's Director of Global Policy, Eloise Todd, stated at the Action 2015 launch event, we need to make more noise than ever before. We need to make it impossible for leaders to ignore us. This is Bjorn Schwarzenbach reporting for the Global Current.
And finally, executive producer Bill Golba talks to Seton Hall Junior Cynthia Sularz about her experiences as the U.S.'s representative at the Girls 20 Summit in Australia last August.
Hi, this is Bill Golba, and I'm sitting down this morning with Cynthia Sularz, a Seton Hall junior who was the United States' representative to the Girls 20 Summit in Sydney, Australia. Hi, Cynthia. Thanks for coming in.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
So tell me a little bit about yourself. How did you come to Seton Hall? Where are you from? How did you wind up as a Diplo?
I was born in West Milford, New Jersey, which is not that far from here. I got really into Maldi UN early on in high school, my freshman year. I also grew up in a very history-based household. My father would read a lot of history books and always talk to us about it, and my brother's a history teacher. So it was something that was always a part of my life and something that I always loved dearly. So finding out about Seton Hall's diplomacy program seemed perfect because it coupled the diplomacy along with a kind of the historic background and the international perspective of also something that was important to me because I grew up in a first-generation Polish household. So my parents always emphasized the fact that America's not the only country in the world and we live in a global community. So that was something that was essential to my choice of becoming a diplomacy major.
Tell me about the Girls 20 Summit.
So to put it simply, Girls 20 is an organization that works to economically empower women and girls internationally. They do so by giving them a voice in the global community. They bring together about 24 different delegates from around the world, the G20 countries, plus a representative from the MENA region, from the African Union, from Afghanistan and Pakistan, which were the two newest countries to be added to the list for Girls 20. They bring them together to have an international conversation, get to know each other, learn about each other's cultures, and figure out just where the similarities and differences in the fight for gender equality are, and how each person has their different experiences and what they can bring to the table. Many times the voices of the girls that we're talking about are obscured by the international community's different goals, and it's essential that there's organizations that give them a voice, that put them at the forefront of the conversation, because who better to figure out what they need to be economically empowered than somebody that actually needs to be economically empowered.
That's great. That's a good point. So how did you get involved with Girls 20 then?
So I got involved with Girls 20 through an application process. Actually, the president on campus for Women, Amanda Gagné, shares a lot of posts about how to get involved in the international community. And she was the one who posted this link to an organization that I instantly fell in love with. And to have that application process, something to work on at that time, was also really essential because I just had to move my study abroad and was rushing back to be at Seton Hall for another semester when I was originally intending to be abroad at that point. So having that application process was wonderful. I found out about the application about a week before it was actually due. So it was a series of essays, a video that you had to send in, and then about a month later, I got an email from the CEO of the organization telling me that I have to do an interview the next day at either 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, and it was between me and another person, and I instantly just got my friend's laptop because my computer wasn't working at this point, and did the interview the next day, and it was perfect. Everything just worked out so well.
That's great. So how many people applied for this position?
I know it was between about 800 and 1,000. I'm not exactly sure what the number is, but I know it was up there.
Wow, that's impressive. Tell me a little bit about the conference itself. What all did you do there?
Instantly when we got off the plane, we were able to talk to all the different delegates, and even though each of us was jet-lagged and tired, it was so much passion and so much excitement instantly. I sat down with the delegate from China, and we instantly clicked because she was just studying abroad in Germany, and I was going to Germany after this trip. I also talked to a delegate from Argentina who was super interested in poetry and writing, which showed the diversity of the girls here. Not all of them were political science students or diplomacy students. They were writers, they were creators, they were scientists, they were everything. I was instantly inspired by each of them, and I knew it was going to be an amazing conference.
So what were some of the things that you learned about at the conference?
So for the first few days, we had a workshop set up by Girls 20 in the Canadian Embassy, which is Girls 20 comes out of Canada, so that's why it was centered there. We had different representatives from Bain & Co. come speak to us about marketing and how to market an idea or a project and how to get yourself out there in an organization. We had representatives from PPR, which is an Australian consulting company, so for business-to-business work, they explained that. We also had the chance to go to Google headquarters in Sydney, Australia, and speak to the different CEOs of the region, which was amazing. We got to speak to individuals who were trying to get women more involved in tech. We were able to see what Google headquarters looks like in Australia, which was really cool. And it was just all around a wonderful experience leading up to the actual 2-day conference.
So what did you do then at the actual 2-day conference?
Well, the 2-day conference was located actually within the Sydney Opera House, which was an amazing experience. It was wonderful to hear all the speakers in that type of setting. So one of the speakers that really stood out to me was a 16-year-old youth ambassador to the UNICEF Corporation. She represents, she's the youth ambassador to Ethiopia, and we got to speak with her afterwards. Her name's Hannah. She's so nice. And it was wonderful to hang out with her and hear her speak. She was so eloquent. So it was really inspiring to see somebody that's so young, so passionate, leading kind of the fight for gender equality and empowering women transnationally. So we also had different representatives talk to us on the different topics. So we had agriculture as a topic, mental health, which is a very controversial topic across nations. We had technology as well as manufacturing as topics, power in general, and then Men Champions for Change was also really unique because we had the general of the Australian Army come speak to us about his fight to end sexual violence within the military, as well as...
That's something that the United States has been struggling with as well.
Exactly. So it was wonderful to see someone stepping forward. And then we had the CEO of Goldman Sachs for the region come speak to us too about how necessary it is to have diversity within his organization.
So what were the outcomes of this?
So the outcomes of the workshops as well as the actual conference was meant to kind of inspire the delegates to write exactly what we wanted in our communique. And our communique was written in a standard resolution type of format. We were in a room for an entire day, just locked in a room, and had to talk about exactly what we wanted within it. Some topics, again, were very controversial, and we all had varying opinions. And it was fantastic to just be in that type of setting and writing with these girls. And even if we didn't agree with each other, we were able to come to a conclusion at the end of the day, to come to the end of our communique, and it's just an amazing document in my mind. So.
And what happened with the communique after you had finished writing it?
The Australian delegate was able to give it to a bunch of different representatives throughout the Australian government, as well as people that directly work with Tony Abbott, and as well as the representatives right below him.
And Tony Abbott is the Australian Prime Minister?
Yes. We also actually had the representative for the Women and Girls Department under Tony Abbott come speak to us. So she was a big component in pushing forward for it. She ran with Tony Abbott, and it was wonderful meeting with her too, and getting to hear her speak and have her support. So I know other delegates were able to also give their communiques to different heads of state and as well as different organizations that they work for. So it's been fantastic to see it kind of incorporated into the international dialogue. And even after the G20 released their resolution, there was definitely clauses that we felt were related to the topics we discussed about empowering women, getting them involved in manufacturing and key growth areas. So it was wonderful to see that kind of the work we were doing, even if it wasn't exactly coming from our organization, the conversations we're having as well as other organizations are having are being reflected in the international community's actual resolutions.
You're working on a project now, yes?
Yes, I'm working on a kind of small project. It's a video project about the confidence gap between men and women, particularly at the university level, and how that translates to a gap in promotions as well as wages in the actual workplace. So it's a conversation between me and a bunch of different girls that I've been recording for the past few months about how they see confidence, how they see apologizing in the classroom, how their experiences with sexual discrimination have kind of shaped their thought process. And my goal for it is mainly to help girls to recognize the sociology behind the way that they're thinking, so that when they do enter the marketplace, when they do start working in real jobs, they know when they're doing right, that they're not scared to actually ask for promotions or ask for raises when they know that they should have one. As a good friend always tells me, everything kind of comes down to sociology and conditioning from a very young age. And so it's the sooner that girls are able to recognize their self-worth and their abilities at a younger age, the less gaps there'll actually be in the workplace and the more diversity that will be showcased.
Yeah, that's certainly true. So, are you working with anyone in particular on this project?
I'm working with Girls 20 still. I'm still videotaping a few different individuals, as well as I'm going to be working with the Women for Women chapter on campus. I'm going to be giving a presentation actually in February with them, and then recording a few different representatives from the organization. And then it comes down to sitting down and editing, which is going to be a lot because I have a wide variety of females that I met in Australia that were from the U.S., as well as I interviewed a few people that I met in Germany that were also from the U.S. So once again, because I was a United States delegate, everything had to be kind of focused on where we can make strides within my nation.
Jumping back, I guess, to the summit itself, you just mentioned that. Did you notice that there were any cultural differences or conflicting views on goals and what the agenda should be based on where the girls were from?
There were a few topics that I think were very different and controversial and things that you don't normally think about. One thing that was brought up to us was gender-specific farming equipment. Because in nations like Cambodia, actually rice, which is considered a very profitable crop, is considered a man crop, a crop that's only allowed to be grown by men.
Really?
Yeah, it's something that you in the United States and other countries, it's just something we don't even think about. We just look at rice and we don't see it as gendered. But because it's a profitable source, women aren't allowed to grow it. And one of the biggest issues also is that when women are given a way to grow something that isn't traditionally more profitable and they start making a profit on it, then the royal communities will sort of take that away and say that the women are allowed to grow it once it becomes profitable, which makes it extremely difficult for a lot of different women to earn wages. Although it wasn't a topic that was disagreed with, it was something that was really shocking for a lot of other delegates to hear something like that. We also had a very big conversation on whether or not to include something about gendered workplaces, such as having kind of a safe place for women to be able to work with only women if their religion or cultural background doesn't allow them to interact with men. So it allows for women to have a job while also keeping their cultural ties. And that was something that there was a few delegates that were very adamantly against, and they saw that as being something that was more oppressive than actually helpful. That became like a whole conversation about whether or not to include it. Even just in private conversation too, the concept of marriage was a very controversial idea. There was women that feel like they're being forced in the next few years of their lives to getting married, while we had a delegate that was our age, 20 years old, that was engaged by her choice, and she wanted to get married and she could not wait to get married. And she was from one of the more Western nations. Her talking about that, and then somebody saying like it's wonderful that you have the choice to get married, but I don't want to be married at this age, and I'm being forced to. So to hear those varying opinions across like a dinner table is something that I feel like an experience that I don't know, I hope I can have again.
Yeah, that's certainly something that all of us should hope, that we have those kinds of opportunities as well. And I think that's a good place for us to leave it there, that we've had a great opportunity to kind of learn vicariously and share those experiences with you. So Cynthia, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a great time.
This has been Bill Golba and Cynthia Sularz on The Global Current.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of The Global Current. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. I'm Karina Taylor.
And I'm Alex Krause.
We'll see you next week.
The Global Current is brought to you by the School of Diplomacy and International Relations at Seton Hall University. Our executive producer is Bill Golba. Our co-executive producers are Daniel Garay and Felicia Sharabali. Our technical producer is Evan Doolittle. Our news and analysis editors are Gabriela Taveras and Catherine Beatty. The theme song is Acid Jazz by Kevin Macleod. This has been Global Current on WSOU, Seton Hall's Pirate Radio.